My late wife's necklace was the only thing I had left of her. When I couldn't find it, my daughter said, the necklace was sold. I needed the money for a vacation. When I called the pawn shop to try to get the necklace back, they said, Sir, you won't believe what we found when we opened the medallion on the pendant. I didn't even know it opened. My name is Gerald Colton. Everyone calls me Jerry. I'm 58 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and for 2 years I raised my daughter alone after my wife died. I thought I knew that girl better than I knew myself. I was wrong. Here's what happened. It was a Sunday morning, March the 9th, and I was standing in my bedroom on Birchwood Lane, looking for something to give my daughter for her birthday. I remembered a small gold bracelet Diane used to keep in the same drawer as her jewelry box, and I figured Megan might like it. So I opened the top drawer of the old oak dresser, the same dresser Diane and I bought at an estate sale 20 years ago, and I reached toward the back where the velvet box always sat. My hand touched empty wood. I moved some folded scarves out of the way, thinking maybe it had shifted. Nothing. I pulled the drawer all the way out and set it on the bed and went through every single item twice. The velvet box was gone. Not just the bracelet. The box that held Diane's necklace, the one she wore almost every day of her life until the day she died, the one I had not let anyone touch in 2 years. My chest went tight in a way I hadn't felt since the hospital. I told myself I was overreacting, that I probably moved it myself and forgot, because grief does strange things to a man's memory, and mine had been playing tricks on me for 2 years already. I checked the closet. I checked her old jewelry armoire in the hallway. I checked under the bed like a fool, on my knees at 58 years old, patting the carpet with my hand. Nothing. My phone was sitting on the nightstand. I picked it up and looked at the screen for a long moment before I called my daughter, because some part of me already knew I wasn't going to like the answer I was about to get. Before I tell you what Megan said, you need to understand what that necklace actually meant, because to anyone else it might just look like a gold heart-shaped locket on a thin chain. I gave it to Diane on our 25th wedding anniversary. I saved for 4 months to buy it from a small jewelry store on High Street, and the day I gave it to her, she cried right there in the kitchen and told me she never wanted to take it off. She didn't. 2 years later, when the cancer came, that necklace never left her neck, not during chemo, not during the bad nights, not even the morning she passed. When she was gone, I couldn't bring myself to give it to anyone, not even Megan, even though Diane had once said, half joking, half serious, that it should go to our daughter someday. I kept it in that velvet box in my drawer, because looking at it still felt like looking at her. Megan was 22 when her mother died, and I'll admit, I didn't handle her grief the right way. I worked longer hours instead of shorter ones. I let her pull away instead of pulling her close. Somewhere in those 2 years, she started dating a guy named Brad, older than her by a few years, drove a nice truck, talked a big game about a business he was starting, and never once, not one single time, came to Sunday dinner without complaining about something. Megan changed around him. She started talking about trips and brands and things her mother never cared about. She stopped calling just to talk, the way she used to when Diane was alive. She started asking me for money more often, and got quiet and short with me whenever I said no, or even asked what it was for. I noticed all of it happening, little by little, month after month. I just didn't do anything about it. I told myself she was young, that she was grieving in her own way, that Brad was a phase she'd grow out of once she found her footing again. That's on me, all of it. But nothing, not one single bit of it, prepared me for what she was about to tell me on the phone that Sunday morning. Megan picked up on the fourth ring, sounding half asleep. Hey, Dad. I didn't waste time. Megan, where's your mother's necklace? The one in my drawer, the velvet box. It's gone. There was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause that tells you everything before a single word gets said. Okay, don't be mad. 4 words that made my stomach drop straight through the floor. Megan, I sold it, okay? I sold it. I actually sat down on the edge of the bed because my legs didn't feel steady. You sold your mother's necklace. It was just sitting in a drawer, Dad. It wasn't doing anything, and Brad and I really wanted to go to Cancun before his cousin's wedding, and I didn't have the money, and you know how you get when I ask you for anything. I could hear a suitcase zipper in the background. She was packing while she said this. That necklace was the last thing your mother ever wore, Megan. She died wearing it. I know, Dad, and I'm sorry, but it's not like she's coming back for it. The words landed like a slap, not loud, not screamed, just said, flat and easy, like she was talking about a chair she sold on Facebook Marketplace. Where did you sell it? I asked, my voice shaking now. Some pawn shop off Route 40, Sterling something. Look, I have to finish packing. Our flight's at 2. She hung up before I could say another word. I sat there on the edge of that bed for a long time, phone still in my hand, staring at the empty drawer, feeling something in my chest turn from grief into something colder and much more determined. 25 years of marriage, 2 years of grieving alone, and it all seemed to collapse down into that one empty velvet box sitting open on the bedspread beside me. I kept thinking about Diane's face the day I gave her that necklace, the way she'd cried right there in the kitchen, and how she used to touch it without even realizing she was doing it, especially in the hospital, especially near the end. Now some stranger behind a pawn shop counter had it sitting in a glass case with a price tag, and my daughter was somewhere packing a suitcase for a beach vacation like none of that mattered at all. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that, because I've cried plenty of times since Diane died, but that morning something in me just went still and focused, the way it does right before a man decides he's not going to let something go. I got dressed, got in my truck, and drove straight down Route 40 looking for a pawn shop with the word Sterling in the name. I found it 15 minutes later, a squat brick building with bars on the windows and a faded sign that read Sterling Pawn and Loan. I walked in and a bell rang over the door. Behind the counter was a heavy-set man in his 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his head, name tag that said Frank. I told him straight out, no small talk, that my daughter had sold a gold heart-shaped locket necklace here, probably within the last few days, and I needed to buy it back. Frank pulled up something on an old computer, typing slow with 2 fingers, and after a minute he nodded. Yeah, I remember that piece. Young woman came in Thursday, sold it outright, didn't want a loan on it, wanted cash same day. My hands were flat on the counter, gripping the edge without me even realizing it. Is it still here? Frank looked at the screen again. It's in the case, hasn't sold. You're lucky, pieces like that usually move fast. Relief hit me so hard my knees actually went weak for a second. I need it back. Whatever she got for it, I'll pay double. Just tell me the number. Frank held up a hand. Let me pull the piece first and get you a real price. And sir, before we finish that up, I need to run a full appraisal on it since it's changing hands again. Give me about 20 minutes. I sat in a plastic chair against the wall, while Frank disappeared into a back room with the necklace in a small tray. And those 20 minutes felt longer than the 2 hours I once spent in a hospital waiting room hearing about Diane's diagnosis. My phone buzzed twice while I waited. Both times it was Megan, texting like nothing had happened. Landed in Cancun. Beach is gorgeous. Wish you could see it, LOL. I didn't answer either one. I just stared at the case of old rings and watches in front of me, thinking about how a girl could sell her dead mother's necklace on a Thursday and be posting beach pictures by Sunday afternoon like the two things had nothing to do with each other. Frank came back out holding the necklace in a small plastic bag, and just seeing it again, that little gold heart catching the light under the store's fluorescent bulbs, nearly knocked the wind out of me. Here's your piece, he said, setting it on the counter gently. Original sale was $150. I can let it go back to you for $200. Call it even, no markup, since it's clearly a family matter. I could have hugged the man. I pulled out my wallet right there and paid him in cash before he could change his mind. He was writing up a small receipt for the transaction when he stopped mid-sentence, picked the locket back up, and turned it over slowly in his fingers, squinting at the back of it under the counter light. Huh, he said quietly, almost to himself. That's strange. I leaned forward. What's strange? He turned the pendant sideways, running his thumb along a nearly invisible seam I had never once noticed in 25 years of seeing that necklace on my wife's neck. Sir, he said slowly, looking up at me, did you know this thing opens? I told him no, absolutely not. I'd owned that necklace's memory for 25 years and never once knew it had a hinge in it. Frank set it down on a soft cloth on the counter and worked at the seam carefully with a small metal tool from a drawer behind him, the kind jewelers use for tiny clasps. Some old lockets like this have a hidden compartment, he explained while he worked, usually for a photo or a lock of hair, back in the day. This one's got a spring catch, real small, easy to miss unless you're really looking close at the piece. My heart was pounding in a way it hadn't pounded since the phone call from Megan that morning. After a moment there was a tiny click, almost too quiet to hear, and the back of the heart-shaped pendant popped open on a hinge no bigger than a fingernail. Frank went still. He looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as careful, like a man who wasn't sure how to say what he was about to say. Sir, you're going to want to sit down for this. I told him I was fine standing. He turned the open locket toward me and folded up inside. Pressed flat against the tiny metal backing was a piece of paper so small and thin I almost didn't believe it had survived being folded that way for who knows how many years. Frank used a pair of tweezers to lift it out carefully, and he unfolded it just enough for me to see there was handwriting on it. Small, careful, unmistakably feminine handwriting. My hands were shaking as I reached for it. Frank hesitated only a second before he handed it over. Whatever that is, he said quietly, it looks like somebody wanted it found by the right person. I didn't open that letter in the pawn shop. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly, and something in me needed privacy for whatever I was about to read. I thanked Frank, shook his hand, and drove home with the necklace and that tiny folded piece of paper sitting on the passenger seat like they were made of glass. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Diane and I had eaten 10,000 dinners together, and I unfolded the paper slowly, careful not to tear it, because I already had a feeling in my gut about whose handwriting this was. I was right. At the top, in Diane's small, neat cursive, it said, "To whoever finds this," but really, to my Jerry. My throat closed up before I even read the next line. She must have written this and folded it into that hidden compartment sometime in her last year, back when she was still strong enough to sit at her jewelry box and do quiet, careful things like this without me noticing. I sat there for a full minute just staring at her handwriting, running my thumb over the ink like it might still be warm. Diane had been gone 2 years, and here she was, reaching out from somewhere, saying something to me she'd apparently been saving for exactly this moment, folded up small and hidden inside a piece of jewelry neither of us ever thought would leave this house, let alone end up in a pawnshop case 15 minutes down Route 40. I took a deep breath, the kind you take before you jump into cold water, and I started reading the rest of what my wife had written to me. The letter read, "Jerry, if you're reading this, it means the necklace left our house somehow, and if I know myself, and I know myself pretty well after 56 years, that means something happened with Megan. I love our daughter more than my own life, but I've watched her change these last 2 years since I got sick, and it scares me. I've seen the way she looks at things now, like everything has a price tag on it, including the people who love her. So here's what I did. Back in January, before I got too weak to leave the house, I went to see Daniel Reyes, the attorney 2 blocks from the pharmacy. I opened a trust for Megan using money from my life insurance policy you don't know I increased 2 years before I got sick. $45,000, meant for her future, a house, a wedding, whatever she needs when she's ready to build a real life. But I put one condition on it, Jerry, just one. If this necklace, the one I wore every single day of my life, ever leaves our family without your permission, sold or given away, or lost through carelessness, the entire trust redirects automatically to St. Jude's Children's Hospital in my name instead. I know that sounds harsh, but I needed to know, even after I was gone, whether our daughter valued family or valued money more. I've watched her get colder about things that used to matter, and I've watched that boy she's with encourage every bit of it, and it scares me more than the cancer does most days. I'm sorry to put this on you, Jerry, I really am, but I trust you to do the right thing with whatever you find out, the same way I've trusted you with everything for 30 years. I love you. I have always loved you, since the day you walked me home from that diner on 5th Street and didn't even try to kiss me goodnight. Take care of our girl, even if this breaks both your hearts a little before it heals anything. Diane. I set the letter down on the table and put my head in my hands for a long, long time, longer than I'd let myself grieve in months. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning I drove to Daniel Reyes's office, a small brick building 2 blocks from the pharmacy, exactly where Diane's letter said it would be. Daniel was an older man, maybe 65, with a calm, careful way of talking, and when I told him who I was and what I'd found folded inside my late wife's necklace, he didn't look surprised at all. He pulled a thick folder from a locked cabinet and set it on his desk between us. "Your wife came to me alone in January, about 8 months before she passed," he said. "She was very clear about what she wanted, $45,000 in trust for Megan, with the exact conditions she described in that letter. I drafted the paperwork myself. Megan has no idea this trust exists. Your wife specifically asked that neither of you be told until the right moment." I sat there absorbing that. Diane had planned this quietly, carefully, without a single hint to me, back when she was already sick, already dying, already thinking harder about her daughter's character than about her own comfort. "The condition triggered the moment the necklace changed hands outside the family," Daniel continued. "Legally, as of Thursday afternoon when your daughter sold it, the redirect clause is already active. The full $45,000 is scheduled to transfer to St. Jude's within 30 days, unless you, as the named trustee, choose to intervene for a specific reason outlined in Section 4. I asked him what that reason could be. He looked at me steadily. "Your wife left one narrow exception. If Megan learns the truth, genuinely understands what she did, and makes real amends before the 30 days are up, you have the authority to stop the transfer. It's your call entirely, Gerald, not mine." I thought about that drive home for a long time, past the pharmacy, past Sterling Pawn and Loan, past the high school Megan graduated from 5 years ago. Part of me wanted to call her right then and scream every bit of this at her over the phone, but Diane hadn't written that letter for a phone call. She'd folded it small and hidden it somewhere it would only be found if something serious happened, which told me she wanted this handled with weight, not with anger. So I planned something instead. I called Diane's older sister, my sister-in-law Patricia, who lived 2 towns over and had always been close with Megan growing up, and I asked her to come to Sunday dinner. I called Daniel Reyes and asked if he'd be willing to attend as well, to explain the legal details himself, since hearing it from a lawyer would carry more weight than hearing it from a heartbroken father. Then I called Megan. She'd just gotten back from Cancun 2 days earlier, tan and cheerful, telling me all about the resort like we hadn't had the conversation we'd had. I told her I wanted to have a family dinner Sunday, that Aunt Patricia was coming, and that it was important. She asked if I was still upset about the necklace. I told her we'd talk about everything Sunday. I didn't mention Daniel. I didn't mention the letter. I wanted her to walk into that dinner exactly the way she'd walked out of our house Thursday morning, careless and light, because I had a feeling that by the end of the night, she wasn't going to feel that way anymore, and I needed her to feel every bit of the difference. Sunday dinner started normal enough. Patricia arrived first, hugged Megan tight, told her how much she looked like Diane when she smiled, which made Megan's eyes go a little glassy, though I noticed she recovered fast. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later with his folder tucked under his arm, and Megan's smile faltered the second she saw a stranger in a suit sitting down at our kitchen table. "Dad, what's going on?" I waited until everyone had a plate in front of them, though nobody touched their food, before I set the folded letter on the table where Megan could see it. "Your mother wrote this," I said, "and hid it inside the necklace you sold Thursday." Megan went pale. I read the letter out loud, every word, my voice steady even though my chest wasn't. When I got to the part about the $45,000 trust, Megan's hand flew to her mouth. When I got to the part about the redirect clause, about Street, Jude's, about the 30 days already ticking down because of what she'd done, she started crying. Real crying, not the composed kind. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I didn't know, Dad. I swear I didn't know any of this." Daniel spoke next, calm and factual, confirming every detail, the amount, the date the clause triggered, the fact that legally the money was already on its way out of her life unless something changed. Megan looked at Brad's name on her phone, sitting face up on the table where she'd set it earlier, and something in her expression shifted when she looked back at us. "Does Brad know about any of this?" Patricia asked quietly. Megan shook her head slowly. "He just knew I needed cash fast. I never told him why. He didn't even ask." Her voice cracked completely on that last part. Patricia reached over and put a hand on Megan's shoulder without saying anything else, just letting her sit in it. Daniel closed his folder and set it aside, giving the room a moment before he spoke again. "The 30 days start from the date of sale," he said gently. "That gives you time, Megan. Not forever, but time." Megan wiped her face and looked at me, really looked at me, in a way she hadn't in almost 2 years. The room went completely silent after that, nobody touching their food, and I watched my daughter finally understand the full size of what her carelessness had already cost her. The days after that dinner were hard ones. Megan called Brad that same night to tell him what had happened, and by Tuesday he'd stopped answering her texts altogether, which told me everything I needed to know about what he actually valued in that relationship. Megan showed up at my door Wednesday evening, no makeup, hair pulled back, looking more like the girl she used to be before her mother got sick. She sat at the kitchen table and told me she'd spent 3 days replaying every conversation she'd had with her mother in the last year of her life, trying to remember if there'd been signs she missed, moments her mom had been quietly watching her, testing her, hoping for something better than what she'd gotten. "I don't want the money, Dad," she said, and I believed her because her voice didn't have that flat, careless tone anymore, the one she'd used on the phone the day she told me she'd sold the necklace. "I want to earn it back, not the trust. Mom. I want to earn back the person she thought I could be." I didn't say anything for a long moment. I thought about Diane's letter, about the exception clause Daniel had described, about the fact that this decision was entirely mine to make. I told Megan the truth, that I wasn't going to make this easy, that real amends meant real time, real change, showing up for things instead of talking about showing up. She nodded, wiped her face, and said she understood. Then she asked if she could see the necklace, just to hold it for a minute. I went and got it from the drawer, and I watched my daughter hold her mother's necklace in both hands and cry the kind of tears that come from actually understanding something for the first time. I gave Daniel my decision the following week. I told him I wanted to honor the spirit of what Diane intended, not just the letter of it, so we split the difference the way I believe my wife, in her heart, would have wanted. Half the trust, $22,500, went to St. Jude's Children's Hospital in Diane's name, exactly the way she'd planned if things went wrong, because something had gone wrong, and that consequence needed to mean something real, not just be forgiven away. The other half stayed in trust for Megan, locked until she turned 28, 3 years away, with Daniel checking in with me every 6 months on how she was doing, not with money, but with showing up, the way Diane always had for the people she loved. Megan didn't fight me on it. She said it was fair, more than fair, considering. As for the necklace, I didn't put it back in that drawer. I had a small clasp added to the chain so it could close properly around a neck again, and on what would have been Diane and my 30th wedding anniversary, I gave it to Megan myself, at our kitchen table. No lawyers, no letters, just the two of us. I told her I thought her mother would want her to have it now, worn, not hidden away, as long as she understood exactly what it meant and exactly what it had already cost. She put it on and didn't take it off again. Sometimes late at night I still think about how a tiny folded letter, hidden inside a piece of jewelry for 2 years, ended up teaching my daughter more about her mother than I ever managed to say out loud myself. Diane always did find a way to have the last word.